Episode 231, Haley Needs Help.
Miss Haley, did you hear what I said just now?
Tyler asked hesitantly when he saw Haley poking her head in the car door. Just now? Weren't you talking about flowers? She replied innocently. Tyler coughed.
Thank God she didn't hear the whole word. That was close, he thought, breathing a sigh of relief. Are you ready to go home now, Miss Haley?
He asked. Haley climbed in the car before she replied, Yes, let's go home. Ken started the car up and they headed for home. Mr. Clark, what time is your flight? Haley asked after a couple minutes.
In about 6 hours. Why? He replied.
Haley seemed relieved. I'm planning to wrap these gifts myself, so I'm glad I'll have plenty of time for that, she said. Once they had arrived back at Gray Mansion, the men headed to Brad's study while Haley set herself up in the living room to wrap presents. After watching her from the doorway for a few minutes, Mr. Wilson got an idea in his head. Where's Brad? He whispered to Mr. Green. When he replied they were in the study, Mr. Wilson walked in that direction. Once there, he knocked on the study's door. Brad opened it. Tyler and Ken were having a serious discussion behind him.
What are you doing here? Stop hiding inside this dark den of yours and go help your wife. She needs your help, the elderly man said.
Brad's eyes widened.
Did something happen? Where is she?
He asked anxiously. His grandfather hadn't been expecting the troubled look on Brad's face or his anxious reaction, so he spoke quickly.
Downstairs. Why are you so...
But he couldn't finish his words because Brad had pushed past him and hurried down the stairs, worried something bad had happened to his wife.
He might have misunderstood what you mean, sir. He might have thought that something bad happened and she needed his help,
Mr. Green explained when Mr. Wilson mentioned it to him.
Is he always like this?
Yes, he worries too much about her, Mr. Green said.
Mr. Wilson was awed by this. He silently moved down the stairs, determined to spy on the couple. He had decided he should watch them interact for a bit before using the tricks he had hidden up his sleeve. Haley's head popped up when she heard fast footsteps coming down the stairs. Brad was rushing toward her, and the next second, he had her by the shoulders, examining her from head to toe.
Are you okay? Did something happen?
He asked, his voice filled with extreme worry. He was breathing heavily, and Haley was stunned by his behavior. I'm fine. What's wrong? She replied while he continued to inspect every inch of her. When he didn't answer, she took hold of his anxious face and forced him to look her in the eyes. Brad, I'm all right, and nothing happened, okay? She said earnestly. It took him a few minutes, but he finally calmed and then pulled her into a tight hug. Brad, did something happen? She asked as she caressed his head gently. He pulled back and lifted his hand to her shoulder.
I think I misunderstood something again. Sorry,
he said as he picked up the ribbon that had fallen on the floor when he had grabbed her. His sad expression concerned her. Once again, he had been worrying too much about her, and she wanted to find a way to lift his spirits. So she took his hand in hers. Come, I'll teach you how to wrap a gift box, she said, flashing him a bright smile. And just like that, his uneasy feelings faded away. He had been about to agree when he caught sight of a little pink box, perfectly wrapped in beautiful paper, and hesitated. Haley followed his gaze to the small box and chuckled. She already knew that he thought it would be impossible for him to wrap something so small and pretty. Don't worry, I'll help you. Let's wrap this one together, she said happily. There was no way he would say no to her. But then he decided he didn't like the idea of wrapping a gift for someone else when he hadn't even wrapped a gift for his own wife. So with a straight face, he announced,
I'll only wrap a gift if it's for you.
His blatant honesty took her by surprise, and she was completely floored. Episode 232, Wrapped Up in Red Ribbons. Brad was sitting across from Haley and was quietly watching her. They were sitting on a fluffy white rug with a small round table in between them. The small pink box was in Brad's hand, while Haley was focused on wrapping the bigger box. Brad was scrutinizing the little box as he rested his face against his knuckles when he yawned. Haley, who happened to glance at him, saw him yawn, and for some reason, an adorable yawning cat appeared in her head. Distracted by his cuteness, she reached out and gently pinched his cheek. Ah, you're so cute. I want to put you in a box, wrap you beautifully, and gift you to myself, she said. He looked at her with confusion, but she smiled brightly and ruffled his hair.
Do you really want to do that to me?
Brad asked with his usual curiosity and serious gaze. Haley chuckled. If I say yes, would you let me put you in a box? She asked playfully. Without hesitation, Brad nodded, causing Haley to chuckle again because of the seriousness in his eyes. Is it really okay with you, even if I wrapped you up too? She continued, asking playfully. The man just nodded again.
If that's what you want, I don't mind. But can you tell me why you want to do that to me?
He asked innocently with his confused gaze. Haley gasped in surprise before she put her hand on his face and pinched both his cheeks gently. It's because you're so cute, she said. Brad still didn't get it. He was obviously trying really hard to comprehend what she meant, and it made her continue laughing. Actually, I had this dream one time that there's a huge box given to me on my birthday. When I opened it, I found you inside wrapped with red ribbons, she stated while chuckling, as though she was having so much fun. I was so happy, but then when I hugged you, you turned into a little masked bear and I cried. Funny, right? Brad felt sparks of warm feelings in his chest as he watched her chuckle and laugh wholeheartedly. He hadn't noticed that he was also smiling along with her. But Haley did, and his smile put her in a daze. His perfect white teeth and the curve of his lips left her awestruck. Watching him prompted his smile to fade, and he spoke.
As long as it makes you happy, you can do whatever you want with me,
he said, snapping Haley out of her daze. He's going to kill me if he keeps talking to me like this, she thought. She didn't have words for how his honest and sweet responses made her feel. He took her silence as an opening to keep talking.
But I'm afraid wrapping a huge box will give you a hard time,
he said, his voice now mixed with worry. The worry she heard helped her find her words again. There's no need to worry about that, okay? Because I won't put you in a box or anything. This confused him even more, so Haley, resting her face in her palm, explained, If I put you in a box, you'll suffer inside. You might even have a hard time breathing, so I would never do that. But her explanation had no effect on his expression.
But I'm truly fine with it. I can easily handle it, and it's not dangerous at all,
he replied with a determined look, making Haley chuckle. She moved, kneeling so she could reach out her hand and wrap it around his neck. She pulled him closer and he raised his face a bit to meet her gaze. It won't make me happy if I do that to you. And besides, I don't need to do that. I don't need to wrap you and gift you to myself because you're already mine, right? She asked. Brad's eyes slowly widened as his brain cells began to malfunction. You're already mine. You're already mine. You're already mine. He heard that on repeat in his head like a sweet song. Everything inside him went warm and soft. Inexplicable happiness filled him. He was about to tell her that all of him belonged to her and that everything he had was already hers when her lips landed gently on his forehead and everything disappeared from his mind. He didn't know how to explain what he was feeling with the touch of her lips on his skin, but he imagined it might be what heaven felt like. Since you came into my life, I felt like you're a present that God gifted me. To me, you are the most precious gift I ever received, and you always will be. Episode 233, Sappy Butlers. Tyler was walking down the stairs when he saw the two old men in butler suits peeking quietly at the loving couple in the living room. A mischievous grin flashed across his face, and he quietly walked toward them. Sneaking up to stand right behind them, he cleared his throat softly, making the elderly men turn around. He had planned to gossip with them before he left, so he could at least have an idea of what they were planning, when his eyes suddenly widened with surprise as he took in the butlers' faces.
What the hell happened? Why are these two looking like this?
Tyler was completely bewildered. Both men were teary-eyed. It was as if they had just watched a sad movie. Tyler couldn't believe that the stubborn, hard-headed old king had tears in his eyes. Tyler was beyond excited to see what had caused such a reaction, so he peeked around the corner to see what Brad and Haley were up to. To his dismay, he saw nothing unusual. They were just frozen in place, looking at each other without saying a word, like usual.
What happened? Why are both of you crying?
Tyler asked the butlers. They just wiped their tears and ignored his question, making him even more curious.
Mr. Green, we really are getting too old now, Mr. Wilson said.
Mr. Green nodded.
That's right, sir. We really are getting too old.
Hey, sire, did something happen to them?
Tyler asked again. The older man finally looked at him.
Young man, tell me, how come there is no baby when they're already at this level of affection?
Mr. Wilson asked instead of answering him. His voice was filled with wonder.
Wait, don't tell me you two are actually tearing up because of their sweetness,
Tyler asked. When he confirmed that he was right from their expressions, his shoulders fell in disappointment.
It's not mere sweetness, you punk. The love between them is far beyond words,
Mr. Wilson replied, causing Tyler to sigh.
They're like that every day, though. You better watch out for your health, sire. You can't tear up like this every time you see them show their deep affection for each other,
Tyler said. He was about to walk away when the older man stopped him.
Are you really sure that Brad hasn't touched her yet?
Mr. Wilson whispered. Tyler felt uncomfortable and tried to evade the question.
Sire, I suggest you go and ask the man yourself.
He then excused himself and went to the courtyard. Meanwhile, Brad had finally recovered from the lethal assault that his heart had just experienced. Haley had already let go of him, and she was about to continue wrapping the gifts when Brad suddenly stood, moved to sit behind her, and quietly hugged her from behind. He slipped his arm around her waist and leaned his head on her shoulder. She was surprised, but as soon as his soft hair brushed on her cheek, she lifted her hand and caressed his hair. "If you're sleepy, you can sleep like this. I'll just finish this," she said. He just replied with a soft, Upon hearing him, Haley smiled and she continued doing what she was doing. Brad, on the other hand, wasn't actually sleepy. His mind was filled with ideas. He was thinking deeply. His heart was beating wildly because he had finally made a decision. Episode 234, Secret Chest. When Haley had finished wrapping the gifts, she gave them to Tyler.
Rest assured that your gift will reach your best friend,
Tyler said, giving her a reassuring smile. She smiled back in return. "Thank you so much, Mr. Clark. Also, best regards to your fiancé," she replied. Tyler nodded his thanks. Hours later, Brad and Tyler, along with Ken, came out of the study. The two men followed Tyler to send him off. They walked toward the entrance, and Haley, who had been with Mr. Wilson, joined them.
Hey, you don't need to send me off. It's not like I'm leaving for a long time,
Tyler complained, but no one seemed to be listening to him. They followed him all the way out to the car. "Bye-bye, Mr. Clark. Please come home safely," Haley said.
Thanks, Miss Haley. I'll come back soon. Also, please take care of that husband of yours. Don't let him step outside the mansion until I return,
Tyler instructed her. Haley immediately became concerned. "Why? Is it dangerous for him to go out?" Tyler nodded, causing her to gasp with worry. Tyler was about to say something more when he caught the sharp glare Brad was sending him and clamped his mouth shut. His cold aura let Tyler know Brad was not impressed. He had caused Haley to worry.
Well, as long as he doesn't go out, he'll be fine, so you don't need to worry,
Tyler said with a forced smile when suddenly Haley stepped closer to him. "Don't worry, Mr. Clark. I won't let him go out," she said, and a great determination flashed across her eyes.
Amusing, Tyler. Good woman. That's the spirit. I leave him in your hands then, Tyler happily replied.
But Haley wasn't done, and she stepped even closer so she could whisper in his ear. "Mr. Clark, can I borrow the handcuff you used to restrain him?" she whispered. Tyler chuckled mischievously and grinned.
"You want to use them on him?" he whispered back.
Haley nodded. "Just in case he won't listen to me," she said.
"Come, follow me. I have something to give you,"
he said. She hastily followed him toward a room in the basement. Brad and Ken were left wondering what had just happened and where Tyler and Haley were disappearing to. Ken was about to speak, but the dark aura of his boss made him keep his mouth shut. It suddenly felt very cold outside. Tyler had taken Haley to the storage room, and they were now squatting over an ancient-looking chest. Tyler opened it, and Haley saw it was filled with different kinds of chains and cuffs. Haley's eyes sparkled the moment she saw them. "Can I pick one?" she asked excitedly. Tyler looked at her mischievously.
"Miss Haley, I brought you here for a reason. You can use all of these if you want,"
Tyler said, wowing her. "Really?" she exclaimed.
"Of course."
"Oh, but I can't bear using these chains on him," she said as she put her finger to her chin, considering her options.
"You don't need to be too nice to him, though. His safety is more important,"
Tyler reminded her. She looked up from the chest to nod her agreement. "You're right. Then I'll pick this one." Tyler nodded with approval.
"Not bad."
They shared a high five, then closed the chest and left the storage room, both looking very satisfied. Episode 235, Thwarted. Returning to the driveway, Tyler could feel Brad's cold aura brewing. He began to sweat, anticipating his boss's reaction to his and Haley's little excursion. Thankfully, Haley hastily ran over to Brad with a bright smile, neutralizing the menacing look in his eyes and warming his mood. Taking advantage of the change of atmosphere, Tyler immediately bid farewell with his usual mischievous grin and climbed in the car, leaving Gray Mansion. Later that night, the king started executing his plans. He secretly put a drug in Brad's tea, but it was as if Brad had somehow foreseen his every movement, because Brad chose not to drink the tea. He looked over at his grandfather, communicating without words. "Don't bother wasting your time. I won't fall for it," he thought. The message was received, and the king and his partner in crime, Mr. Green, sighed with disappointment, but they refused to give up so easily. Mr. Green had told the king that Brad had recently started leaving their bedroom at night, and had even been found sleeping on the couch. Horrified, King Anderson thought about locking their bedroom door to prevent Brad from leaving. So that night, before the couple entered their room, he ordered the maids to gather all the keys and bring them to him. As soon as Brad and Haley went into their room, the king locked the door, But as soon as Haley fell asleep, Brad climbed out of bed, not trusting himself to control his desire. He took the spare key from his pocket and opened the door. The two elderly men were disappointed as they watched Brad pad down the hall. Morning came, and nothing had happened. Brad hadn't fallen into any of their traps. On the other hand, Haley had started to feel that Brad seemed to be putting distance between them every time they climbed into bed. He was still acting his usual self during the day, but he would become stiff and silent at bedtime. Since he had returned, Haley found herself waking up alone in bed each morning. She had thought that he was just waking up before her, but she soon found out that he hadn't slept in their bed for 2 nights straight. It made her feel uneasy. She tried to keep her optimistic attitude and convinced herself that he might have something important on his mind, so she tried not to think about it too much. Brad had just stepped out of his study when he saw Haley walking toward him. "Is your work done?" she asked, and when the man nodded, she took him by the hand and dragged him down the hall. He followed along until they reached the garden. She thought that if she engaged him in normal activities, it might help him relax, so she had brought him outside to help her water the plants. "Did you work again last night?" she asked as she gave him a garden hose. He only hummed in response and gave the hose in his hand a curious look. Looking at the way he was staring seriously at the hose's nozzle, Haley smiled. "Is this your first time using it?" she asked. Brad nodded. "Okay, you just pressed that button," Haley said, and so he pressed it without pointing the hose toward the plants. Water then gushed out of the nozzle that was aimed straight at Haley. Brad's eyes widened in shock, and he let the hose fall from his hand as he took in the sight of Haley completely drenched. He hurried toward her, filled with anxiety, and tried to wipe her face with the sleeve of his sweatshirt. "Are you okay? I'm sorry. Brad couldn't continue because Haley suddenly chuckled. It's okay. I'm fine," she replied, but the extremely apologetic look in his eyes didn't fade. So, to make him stop worrying, she picked up the hose and pointed the water at him, completely drenching him in retaliation while she laughed. Episode 236, Averting His Gaze. In romance movies, couples chase each other happily until they slip and fall to the ground, with one person landing on top of the other. Haley and Brad, by contrast, just stood there. Brad was stunned by what she had done, but what shocked him the most was the view that had appeared. Her drenched shirt had shrunk, and it clung to her, revealing the beautiful curves of her waist and chest. Her wide eyes revealing her concern when she remembered that his skin was sensitive to the cold. She gasped and ran to him when she saw the lower part of his face turning red. She didn't know that he was fine and was just blushing. "Are you okay? I'm sorry. I forgot your skin was... Let's go. You need to get changed," she said worriedly. Brad turned to her.
No, it's all right. The water isn't that cold. My skin will only react if it's colder than...
"But your face is already red. Look, even your ears," she exclaimed, cutting him off. He fell silent, knowing that the redness had nothing to do with his cold sensitivity. "Come on, let's go," she said, tugging on his arm. They were a few steps away from the door when he pulled her toward him, turning her to face him and resting her head on his chest. She gasped again, worried that the cold was getting to him, and wrapped her arms around him to warm him. He hadn't expected her to respond like that. He had pulled her close because he had seen Ken standing by the door, and didn't want him or anyone else to see her in her current state. He felt her soft chest pressing against him and her warm hands caressing his back. His cheeks burned and he felt his temperature rising. "Are you all right? Should I call for help?" she asked. He stepped back from her, but when he saw her chest, he pulled her back into his arms. His behavior confused her, but he didn't give her a chance to ask what was going on.
I'm fine,
he said as he gestured to Ken to bring them some towels. "Are you cold? Let me get you a towel," she said.
No, don't. Stay with me,
he said. It sounded like a command. Haley was even more confused. She pulled away from him and looked at him, but instead of meeting her gaze, he averted his eyes. She was speechless and couldn't understand why he didn't want to look at her. Before she could say anything, she heard footsteps approaching. She was about to turn when Brad suddenly wrapped his arms around her, holding her still. A few seconds later, he wrapped a towel around her and let go of her. She stared at him as he wrapped another towel around himself. She waited for him to look at her, but he just took her hand and said,
"Let's go."
His behavior perplexed her, so she stayed motionless, waiting for him to turn to her. He did, but he averted his eyes again. "It's like he can't look at me for more than a few seconds," she thought.
"Let's go. We need to change,"
he said. She followed him quietly, her mind racing. When they reached their bedroom door, he let go of her hand and started to walk away. She tugged at his sleeve and stopped him. "Brad, I feel like you're avoiding my gaze. Am I just imagining things or is something going on?" she asked. Her troubled voice got his attention and he turned toward her. Their eyes met, and he realized that it was his behavior that was troubling her. Seeing the worry and confusion in her eyes made him feel guilty. He kissed her forehead and said, "I have something to tell you, but let's get changed first." His words made her nervous. Episode 237, Busy All Day. While Haley took a shower, she thought about what had happened and why it had left her feeling so strange. She had seen something in his eyes that had made her feel restless, and she eagerly awaited whatever it was that he wanted to tell her. She put her hand on her chest to feel how fast her heart was beating. Why am I so nervous? She wondered. The longer she thought about Brad's behavior, the more she wondered if it would be better to not hear what he wanted to say. She shook her head, trying to clear her mind of such a negative thought. Brad had stepped into his study while Haley showered, and he was just about to leave when he heard a sound coming from one of the computers that he had left working on their own several hours earlier. He stepped back into the room, looked at the screen, and his cold aura flared to life. Haley waited for him, but he didn't come out of his study. She knocked on the door at lunchtime, but Ken told her that he was busy dealing with an emergency. Haley understood that he was fighting against the world, but her heart ached every time she thought about it. The sun was already setting when Tyler returned. The first thing he noticed was the gloomy atmosphere in the dining room, where Mr. Wilson and Haley were sitting across from each other.
What happened?
He asked. Haley turned to him. "Mr. Clark, you're home," she exclaimed, and some of the gloom disappeared.
"Yep, I'm home," he said as she approached him.
"So, how was your fiancé's birthday?" she asked, hoping for good news. He scratched his head.
"The party was canceled because her grandfather was rushed to the hospital," he replied.
Her excitement faded. "Oh no, I hope he and your fiancé are okay," she said. Tyler reflected on what had happened and how disastrous it had been. He hadn't even seen Amy until he had gone to the hospital to visit her grandfather, and by then she had already fallen asleep beside him. Tyler hadn't wanted to wake her, so he had just watched both of them sleep and then left, leaving the gifts behind. He smiled at Haley and said,
"Don't worry, they're all right. Where's Brad?"
"He's in his study. Ken said he was busy. He hasn't come out at all, so I haven't been able to use what you gave me," she said with a pout.
"Busy? What's he doing?" Tyler wondered. "I'll go see what he's up to," he said. She nodded.
As soon as he had gone, Mr. Wilson asked,
"What did he give you?"
Haley sidled toward him and whispered in his ear. A glimmer of hope appeared in his eyes.
"Miss Haley, can you lend it to me?"
he asked. "Of course," she said. "Since Mr. Clark is here, I can't use it anymore. Wait, Grandpa, I'll go get it." She left the room, leaving Mr. Wilson grinning mischievously as though he had finally found something that would make up for all the suffering he had endured because of his hard-headed grandson. Episode 238, A Difficult Decision. Tyler entered the study and leaned against the door. His gaze fell upon Brad, who was sitting at his computer. Ken approached him.
"I'm surprised at how compliant he has become,"
he whispered so that he wouldn't distract Brad. Tyler smirked as he replied,
"Compliant? Not really. He just doesn't want to worry Haley."
"Well, that's why. Well, it's great that he listens now."
Tyler said. "He can't afford to act recklessly now. We had a hard time protecting him in the past because he didn't care whether he lived or died. But things are different now. He has a reason to live."
Ken's eyes widened with surprise. He realized that what Tyler had said was the only possible explanation for his boss's change, and he was thrilled.
"So what's going on with him?" Tyler asked.
Ken sighed.
"I don't know. He went crazy this morning. I think he got some really bad news. And I also think he hurt his hand. He was so angry that he punched the wall."
Tyler was shocked. He knitted his brows and strode across the room toward his boss. Brad glanced up at him, and the calmness in his eyes nearly froze him. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself.
"What are you doing?" he asked, noticing the bruised and bloodied knuckles. When there was no response, he looked at the screen.
Brad had been reviewing the footage from the police station. To his surprise, he had found that the woman the police had shown Haley a picture of wasn't his mother.
"Who is she?" Tyler asked.
There was no response, so he asked another question.
"You haven't found anything on her yet?"
There was still no response, but Tyler noticed that Brad wouldn't look at him. He guessed that he hadn't found any information, raising his suspicions.
"They're still investigating Haley,"
Brad finally said, his cold voice filled with suppressed anger. Tyler knitted his brows and looked through the files Brad had obtained. His eyes slowly narrowed as he read through them. He learned that the FBI and the CIA were working together. They had already found out that Haley had been in Castendale, where Brad and Tyler had taken refuge during their escape 10 years earlier. The most surprising thing was that their investigation indicated that Haley had also disappeared the night they had left, making her appear even more suspicious.
"They're using her to track me. She's their main lead,"
Brad said in the same cold voice. Tyler clenched his fist, realizing that the situation was slowly getting out of control. When he saw the dangerous sparks in Brad's eyes, he felt that a catastrophe was looming. He knew that their enemies would eventually find out where she was living. He could already see what was in store for her.
It's been 10 years and they're still hunting you? They even suspect that she's working with us now?
He cried in disbelief. Since the agents had already believed that she had been with them the night that they had escaped, they would consider her a criminal if they found out about her current connection with them.
What are you going to do?
He asked. He knew that they had reached the point where it wasn't safe for them to stay together.
Brad, you have to make a decision now, he continued.
Brad stood up, quietly walked toward the window, and leaned his head on its frame. After several minutes of silence, he clenched his fist and said,
If I stay with her, they'll be able to hunt her just like they're hunting us. Her life will be turned upside down. I might be able to protect her, but I can't assure her freedom. She'll be treated like a criminal, just like we are.
He spoke monotonously, and his eyes revealed his pain. A beautiful but pained smile spread across his face as he turned to Tyler and said,
What choice do I have?
His eyes glimmered with indescribable emotions. Episode 239, Light Shining Through Darkness. Night had fallen, but Brad, Tyler, and Ken were still in the study. Haley couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about Brad and whatever it was that he wanted to tell her. She had been waiting for him since that morning, but there had been interruptions all day. She knew that all she could do was wait, but the longer she waited, the more restless she felt. When she couldn't stand it anymore, she got up and decided to go for a walk in the garden. She quietly walked downstairs, but just as she was about to reach the door, she stopped. She heard voices that sounded like Mr. Clark's and Mr. Wilson's. She didn't want to eavesdrop, so she was about to make some noise to alert them to her presence. But what she heard next paralyzed her.
What? Haley's in danger. They suspect her. Sooner or later, they'll exploit her connection to Brad. He isn't thinking about leaving to keep her safe, is he?
I don't know. He hasn't said. Her heart raced when she heard Mr. Wilson's question. When she realized that what they were discussing might be what Brad wanted to tell her, her heart broke. Feeling short of breath, she ran to the garden. Her heart ached so painfully that she pressed her fist to her chest. She felt like her heart had been torn to shreds. When she reached the farthest part of the garden, her knees weakened and she sank to the ground with her face buried in her hands. She felt helpless as she imagined Brad leaving her. Her world was slowly crumbling and the pain was unbearable. She loved Brad so much that she couldn't imagine her life or her future without him. She stayed motionless and silent for several minutes. She couldn't even cry. Her face was still buried in her hands when she felt something warm being draped over her. She slowly raised her head and saw Brad looking down at her. His eyes were beautiful, as breathtaking as ever. But as she gazed into those ethereal gems, her heart ached even more. She saw the excruciating pain and sadness in his eyes, and she realized she wasn't the only one who was hurting. She could tell that his heart ached too, and his pain was even greater than hers. That realization broke her heart again. The pain she had felt a few minutes earlier seemed like nothing compared to what she felt when she looked into his eyes. She couldn't stand the thought that he was suffering more than she was. She slowly stood up and faced him, and the blanket that he had draped over her fell to the ground. She gently placed her hand on his face and said, "What are you doing out here? Is your work done?" Contrary to what he had expected, her voice was gentle and soothing. She smiled sweetly, and the pain in her eyes was replaced with hope and her intense fighting spirit. Brad didn't know how to respond to her sudden change of emotions. Tyler had told him that she had overheard what Mr. Wilson had said, so he had expected to find her crying. Yet there she was, gazing at him with hope and determination instead of pain and hopelessness. She caressed his cheeks gently, as though she were trying to soothe his breaking heart. Her gaze told him not to be sad. Her hopefulness and her warm caresses made him feel like she was an angel. He knew that she would never let anything dampen her spirit. No matter what happened, she would still shine brightly. He felt like her light brightened his darkness and eased his pain. But his ironclad will was stronger than ever. Watching her shine, he swore that he would never let anyone, even himself, extinguish her light and plunge her into darkness. He opened his mouth to speak.
Haley, listen to me.
He didn't have a chance to finish. She pulled his face toward her, and before he could react, she kissed him hard. He froze as though he had been immobilized by a spell. She kept kissing him even though he was frozen like a stone. She didn't wait for him to respond. She just kept kissing him hungrily. She slipped her tongue into his mouth, teasing his tongue, and she nibbled on his lip. She stopped to take a breath, and she looked up at her surprised husband. Her face was burning red. This was the first time she had kissed him so forcefully. She smiled at him. "Brad, I love you." she whispered before kissing him again. His defenses had crumbled and he returned her kisses. The intensity of the kiss caught her off guard, but she focused her thoughts. I'm sorry, Brad, but I won't let you say it. I won't. And I won't let you hurt again. I'll fight for you as long as I can. I won't let you go. I know that we can get through this. No matter what happens, I will never give up on you. Never. Episode 240, Begging for Forgiveness. That night, in the farthest part of the garden, they shared their longest kiss ever. They felt that the intensity and passion that they were sharing obliterated the pain in their hearts. Their kiss was a powerful painkiller. They gazed into each other's eyes again, Haley smiling so brightly that Brad's heart melted and his brain blocked out all unpleasant thoughts. Her gaze seemed to tell him to forget about everything else. It's getting cold now. Let's go inside, she said, pulling him toward the house. Their fingers found each other and they held hands tightly as they walked. Haley's grip suggested that she would never let go. When they reached the living room, she turned toward him and looked him in the eyes again. Her mind was racing. She hadn't spent the entire day simply waiting for Brad without doing anything. She had spent the time planning and had studied the new list that Amy had made for her. Even though thinking about the things on the list made her blush, she had decided that it was time. What had happened just a few minutes earlier in the garden had also ignited a fire in her heart. The pain that she and Brad had both felt made her realize that it was time for her to make a move. You spent all day in your study, so you haven't eaten yet, have you? She asked. He shook his head hesitantly. When he saw the worry and sadness that flashed across her face, he said,
But I had some fruit while I was working.
She was always telling him not to skip meals. The worry in her eyes faded. Great, but you still need a proper meal. I'll cook something for you, she said as she dragged him toward the dining room. She seated him there and then went into the kitchen to prepare his meal. The butlers approached her.
Miss Haley, why don't you let the house staff do the cooking?
Mr. Green asked. She smiled, put on an apron, and walked toward the sink to wash her hands. It's fine. I want to cook. She suddenly clamped her mouth shut and looked in the sink. She saw blood. Her eyes widened and she went straight back to the dining room where she grabbed Brad's hand and saw the wound on his knuckles. Her eyes welled. What happened to your hand? Why didn't you tell me you're hurt? She asked. Her voice was filled with concern. Brad, not wanting to worry her, said,
It's nothing.
She shook her head several times. No, it is definitely not nothing, she yelled. She looked angry, but her eyes were filling with tears. Seeing her expression, Brad stood and faced her like a startled child who had just received a good scolding from a parent.
I'm sorry,
he said. He didn't know what else to do. It was the first time she had ever yelled at him. Haley bit her lip. She was upset and angry because she had squeezed his hand so tightly all the way back from the garden, and he hadn't mentioned his injury. The butlers, who had peeked into the dining room, glanced at each other mischievously as they watched the scene between the angry wife and the sorry husband. It was a refreshing reminder of the beauty of young love.
Miss Haley, why don't you take care of his hand while we handle the food?
Mr. Wilson suggested. She breathed deeply and nodded, grabbing Brad's wrist and dragging him through the living room and up the stairs. When they entered the bedroom, she sat him on the couch near the large window and found the first aid kit without saying a word. She sat down beside him and looked at him. His anxious expression made him look like a little boy who had just been punished. The only thing missing was a pair of pouting lips. When she looked at his face, she saw a cute, childlike version of him in her mind. The image erased her frustration, but she forced herself to act upset a little longer. She wanted him to understand that not telling her that he was hurt had upset her, and that she hated it when he neglected himself. Give me your hand, she said. She still sounded upset, so he obediently extended his bloodied hand. She started cleaning the wounds carefully and gently. Tell me if this hurts, she muttered without looking at him.
It's fine,
he said. She pressed his hand a little harder, expecting a reaction, but he made no sound. She looked at his face, but saw no hint of pain. She pressed his hand again, but he didn't even flinch. It really doesn't hurt? She asked with wide eyes. He shook his head innocently.
Maybe I'm just used to it,
he said. Haley bit her lip. It occurred to her that with his upbringing and circumstances, he might have been injured so many times that small wounds were no more troublesome than mosquito bites. She focused on his knuckles. Even though he had told her they didn't hurt, she still gently blew on them as she applied an ointment. Brad felt emotional. He had been startled when she had yelled at him. He didn't understand why she was angry, but as he watched her treating his wounds, she looked as though she was the one who had been hurt. He felt comforted, and her warm breath on his hand made his heart skip a beat. After she wrapped a few bandages around his hand, he said,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you.
He sounded apologetic, but instead of forgiving him, she glared at him coldly. Her cold gaze froze him. She had never looked at him like that before, and it had never occurred to him that she might. He felt an apocalyptic sense of dread, not realizing that she was intentionally tormenting him.
I really am sorry. It won't happen again,
he said, looking alarmed. Haley felt like she was about to burst, but she maintained her composure. She glanced at him without saying a word and continued wrapping his hand. Her silence tortured him. She usually forgave him immediately, smiling at him or ruffling his hair after he had said he was sorry, but his apology didn't work anymore, and he didn't know what to do. When she finished her task, he tried again.
What should I do for you to forgive me?
He asked. He sounded desperate, and his eyes were pleading. She didn't give in to his cuteness. Instead, she looked at him with a serious expression and said, I'll forgive you if you sleep with me tonight.
Episode 241. Special menu.
I will only forgive you if you sleep with me tonight,
Haley repeated. Her tone was serious, and she was talking with authority.
Brad was stunned by her words, but he figured she was just referring to the fact that he had left her to sleep alone for so many nights that she wanted him to stay with her. He couldn't believe that she had forgiven him so easily. He had expected some sort of punishment. He soon realized that his wife was just being so nice to him, like she always was. It made his heart warm up.
I will stay with you,
he agreed. Haley blushed. She had been trying to be bold. She was testing him to see what his reaction would be. But after seeing his innocent face, she knew he hadn't understood her deeper meaning, and she began to feel embarrassed. She struggled to figure out what to say. Promise me you won't leave when I'm asleep, she said, forcing herself to remain calm. Brad looked at her intently.
I promise,
he answered. Haley heaved out a great sigh of relief. She knew she couldn't initiate her plan if he kept sneaking out, so she was glad he promised to stay. Haley's plan was to set things up slowly. Amy had advised her not to be too direct because she knew that Brad was not the type of guy to be too aggressive. Amy had deduced that Brad had not touched Haley yet because he was just too enamored with her, and he had never felt this way before. They had to worry about him getting scared off, so Amy decided it was better for Haley to seduce him slowly, to wear him down until he had no means to resist her charm. She made a list of suggested foreplay techniques that would allow Haley to seduce him. Knowing that her friend had little experience, Amy avoided going into too much detail. She just listed the steps and hoped that Haley would follow them without knowing exactly where they would lead. While Haley was thinking about what to do next, Brad began to speak.
Haley,
He was trying to say something when she interrupted him. He looked at her with a serious and honest expression. It made her heart go wild. Judging by his nervous behavior, she could tell what he was going to say. Remembering Amy's tip, Haley returned Brad's gaze and laid her hand on his forearm. Haley remembered asking Amy what the point in touching a man's forearm was. Her friend had explained that the back of the forearm is extremely sensitive. You can excite a man just by touching him there. She was trying to distract Brad. Thankfully, the move seemed to work. He immediately closed his mouth. The two butlers and the maids were busy preparing food in the kitchen when Tyler walked in. He was hungry. He went into the dining room and was heading straight for the long table when Mr. Green stopped him.
This food isn't for you. The maids will prepare something else for you later,
he said. Tyler looked at him angrily. Why can't I eat this? I'm so hungry right now. I'm not going to wait for something else, Tyler complained, and the old man sighed.
You're being stubborn. Go ahead then, but don't say I didn't warn you,
he replied, shaking his head. Tyler felt suspicious. He scanned the food that was being served, and his eyes slowly widened. Watermelon, grapes, chocolate-covered strawberries, oysters, various raw vegetables, pomegranate juice, salmon, and spinach covered the table. Tyler couldn't believe it. What is this? He was about to complain about the strange menu when he remembered something. He looked at the table and started to figure it out. All the food was considered natural aphrodisiacs. Episode 242, Stuffed. Brad was currently in a daze when a knock on the door made him recover his senses. Haley immediately stood up. A maid came in and told them that dinner was ready. Okay, thank you. We're coming, she said as she smiled and turned back to Brad. Dinner is ready. Let's go, she said, and he nodded. She held his hand as they both left the bedroom. As soon as they reached the dining room, the butler and the maids told the couple to enjoy their meal and scurried off. They both sat down without noticing what was on the menu. Haley's focus was on Brad, but he was distracted. Neither of them noticed the obvious trap that had been served before them. I bet you're hungry, she said. Here, let's eat some fruit first. She began to pick some grapes and put one near his mouth. Say ah, she said. Brad hesitated for a while before he shyly opened his mouth. He was afraid he might upset her again, so no matter how embarrassing it was, he wanted to listen to his wife's commands. Haley was enjoying herself very much. She couldn't believe that Brad wasn't protesting, even though he was obviously blushing. He occasionally lowered his eyes. He was acting shy, and she thought it was adorable. After eating the fruit, Brad was about to grab the utensils when Haley quickly grabbed them from him. He looked at her curiously, but she just smiled brightly at him. "Your hand is hurt. Let me do it," she said sweetly.
"It's fine, I can do it,
Before he could finish his protest, she made a pouty face, causing his will to crumble. He remembered the cold glare she had given him earlier, and he never wanted her to look at him like that again. Meanwhile, Tyler had just finished eating in the kitchen. His meal hadn't been nearly as special as Brad and Haley's, but he was satisfied. He was walking past the dining room when he halted. He moved back and looked at the couple. They were lost in their own world, completely enamored with each other. But no matter how romantic they looked, Tyler couldn't stop himself from chuckling mischievously. He found the situation humorous. He watched the two of them trying to be intimate with each other while they ate. Haley looked excited while feeding Brad. He was acting agreeable, but looked like he was going to cry from embarrassment. Tyler couldn't tear himself away from the interesting scene. He was laughing to himself as he watched them. Brad was never fond of food and didn't eat too much, but Haley was blinded by his cute demeanor and continued to feed him without stopping. The most hilarious thing was that he seemed to be too afraid to say anything to her. He continued to eat everything she gave him, even though he looked full and his hand was already on his stomach. Tyler couldn't believe Brad wasn't going to protest. "Are you really going to torture yourself like this just to please your wife?" he thought, and then laughed again. After a few more minutes, Brad had finally reached his limit.
"You're not eating at all,"
he said to Haley, and she snapped back to reality. "It's fine. I already ate an hour ago," she replied. She was about to fill the spoon again when she finally realized just how much Brad had eaten. She was surprised since he normally had such a small appetite. "You're not full yet?" she asked curiously. He waved his hand in response.
"Yes, I'm full. So full,"
he replied as though he had been waiting for her to ask him for a long time. Watching his reaction, Haley giggled. "You ate a lot this time," she said happily. After a little more time sitting together, they left the dining room. Tyler and the two butlers had hidden in the kitchen. They walked into the dining room after the couple had left. They scanned the table to see what Brad had eaten. The old men looked elated. "I never knew that my grandson was capable of eating this much until now," he said. Mr. Green nodded with approval.
"You're right, sire. For all the years I've been in this house, this is the first time he has eaten this much," the butler replied.
Both men sighed with a sense of great achievement. "It's too early to celebrate yet," Tyler added. "I fear he may have eaten much more than he can handle. Are you sure all this food you served them will put him in the right mood? You don't think he ate so much that he'll just fall asleep, do you?" The three men looked at each other with blank expressions. Episode 243, Ease the Tension. Haley and Brad were already lying on the bed. She was thinking about her next move. For some reason, there seemed to be something unusual going on with Brad. He used to lie quite still when he was on the bed, but now he seemed to be uncomfortable. He kept moving and she got distracted from the task at hand. She was thinking about the seductive massage that Amy had told her about. She thought it was the best way to see how Brad would react when she touched him, but he was acting strange. He was almost at the edge of the bed, obviously keeping his distance away from her as he just looked at the lamp on the table. Haley was hesitant to execute her plan. She was trying to decide if it was the right time or not. She had to keep reminding herself about Amy's advice. The atmosphere is vital. You must consider the mood. If you think it's the perfect time, don't hesitate. Just go for it. Haley spent another 5 minutes trying to make up her mind. She turned toward Brad. She was worried about why he kept shifting uncomfortably. "Brad? Are you okay?" she asked. Both lamps were still lit and he hadn't replaced his mask yet. Haley rose as she moved closer to him. She touched his arm to make him turn to face her.
"I'm all right,"
he replied as he looked at her. For some reason, she still felt uneasy. "You seem uncomfortable. Is something wrong? Do you feel sick?" Haley asked again. She looked worried. He was about to insist that he was fine when he remembered her getting angry at him before for not telling her that he was wounded. He didn't want to lie to her again, so he sat up and spoke.
"I think I ate too much. My stomach feels bad,"
he said as he rubbed the back of his neck. Haley's eyes widened. She bit her lip, realizing that she had fed him too much. He might be suffering from indigestion. "I'm sorry, He cut her off.
"It's fine. It's just an upset stomach. It'll go away soon,"
he said. When she heard the words upset stomach, she immediately remembered her grandmother teaching her a massage technique to ease an upset stomach. Her brother Owen had always suffered from indigestion when he was young, so she had mastered the technique. She looked at Brad with confidence as she spoke. "I know a remedy to help you," she said enthusiastically, jumping out of bed suddenly. After a while, she returned with a towel and a bottle of oil in her hands. "Let me massage your stomach. I'm really good at it," she said as she sat down. Before he could say a word, she continued. "I learned this technique from my grandmother, so I'm really good at it," she repeated reassuringly. Then she moved onto her knees, held his shoulders, and gently pushed him down. "You need to lie down so that we can get started. This is partly my fault for feeding you too much, so let me do something to help you, okay?" she continued. Brad remained speechless. Without wasting any time, she put oil on her hands and rubbed them together to warm it up. Brad was just watching her quietly, trying to anticipate what she was about to do. The next thing Haley did made his senses go into chaos. She was on her knees, she bent down toward him, and without any warning, she started unbuttoning his pajama top. Her face was so close to his as she continued undoing the buttons slowly. He immediately felt his stomach get worse. Every button she touched was like a ball of fire that was heating his entire body. It seemed like time was slowing down, but his heart started beating faster. She finally reached the last button and opened his shirt. She never expected what she saw, but looking at his physique, anyone could tell that Brad had a great body. However, being so close to his perfectly chiseled chest and taut abs almost knocked Haley senseless. She had never seen a man more gorgeous in her entire lives, not even in magazines. He really was like an imaginary character. Too perfect to be true. She bit her lip reflexively. She was struggling to return to her senses when he suddenly lifted his hand. Her focus on his body was broken as her eyes followed his hand. He put the back of his hand on the top of his head as he quietly inhaled. It was hard to tell if he had finally relaxed or not. She worried that he might be feeling worse now, so she hastily rubbed her palms together again. Brad, on the other hand, was feeling quite troubled. He hadn't expected all this to have such an effect on him. He was having trouble controlling his breathing, and he had no idea how to deal with everything else that was happening to his body. He heaved a deep breath when she finished unbuttoning his shirt. He was trying to calm himself and act normally. He didn't want her to notice him acting strange. Then something beyond all his expectations happened. The moment his wife's hands slowly landed on his stomach, the hot, fiery feeling inside him intensified. Brad was then struck by the most extraordinary sensation.
Episode 244, Is Tonight the Night? In the living room, King Anderson approached Tyler, who was sitting quietly on the couch. "What are you thinking, young man?" he asked. Tyler stretched his back. "Well, I'm wondering if what you fed Brad will even work," Tyler answered with his usual mischievous smile. The king sat down across from him. "You think nothing will happen?" he asked, and Tyler's expression turned serious as he spoke. "Nobody on earth can beat Brad's stubbornness. If he has set his mind not to do something, then nothing will happen, especially now that things are getting worse." "What do you mean? Enlighten me," Anderson asked. "The enemy is working fast," Tyler explained. "They've had their eyes on this place for a long time now. Brad needs to leave tomorrow, no matter what. If he doesn't, everything will fall into chaos." His words left the old man stunned and speechless. "This house was already put into Haley's name a long time ago. Brad has forged the documents to make it happen. They'll never suspect anything as long as he leaves," Tyler continued. "Of course, you'll need to leave as well, sire, before it's too late." "If he leaves, when will he come back?" the old man finally asked. Tyler had to think before answering. "He said that he would leave to end all this trouble. He never said it aloud, but I think he's already decided not to come back unless everything is resolved. This situation is too complicated and dangerous. He hasn't been able to find a single lead all this time. The only solution he can come up with is to go there himself and investigate. You know how dangerous that place is right now. I have no idea how long it'll take and how much will need to be sacrificed to solve this." Anderson sighed and nodded at Tyler's explanation. "So, is this the reason why he doesn't want to be with her right now?" he asked. "Maybe. He never speaks about it," Tyler answered. "That poor kid. I finally understand why he's so reluctant to touch her," Anderson said. "He didn't have a great life growing up," the old man continued. "It was just him and his mother all alone in that lab. I think he's afraid Haley's life will be just as isolating. He's worried that he doesn't know how long he'll have to go away for. His fear is reasonable. I can understand why he wouldn't want to abandon his child like his own father abandoned him." The two men sighed, and then they went quiet for a long time. Finally, Tyler broke the silence. "Honestly, I'm hoping that Brad will give in.
It would be best if Haley gets pregnant.
Anderson looked at him with a gaze demanding an explanation.
The worst enemy Brad has is himself, Tyler explained. He is too reckless for his own good. If he loses himself to rage again, I can't promise I'll be able to stop him. I can try and use his wife to control him, but if there's also a child waiting for him, I believe he won't be so reckless. He will do anything in his power to make things right. Just as you said, he would never want his wife to suffer what his mother went through.
After hearing Tyler's thoughts, Anderson's eyes teared up.
Yes, you're right, he said quietly. We can only pray that doesn't happen.
The old man started to cry. Tyler paused for a moment before he ran to grab some tissue.
He's really getting old now, Tyler thought. I never imagined him as someone who would cry so easily.
Haley had finally begun massaging Brad's abdomen. She was using a fair amount of pressure with her palms and fingers. She could feel the heat of his skin, but she was so focused on her task that she didn't notice what was happening to her husband. She began rubbing in small circles and gradually increasing to larger ones. She continued the movement for about 10 minutes when suddenly Brad stopped her. He grabbed her wrist and lifted it away from his stomach as he rose. Haley looked at him in stunned silence. She was about to speak when she saw big drops of sweat around his face, running down his neck and over his chest and flowing onto his chiseled abs. She was speechless. She swallowed hard while staring at the alluring man in front of her. But after a few seconds, she noticed that he was still breathing heavily. She looked at him with a curious expression.
"What's wrong? Are you all right?" she asked. "Does your stomach still feel bad?" She reached up and held him by his shoulders. "You'll feel better if you let me finish, so please lie down so I can continue," she said, pushing him down again. But before she could remove her hands from his shoulders, he grabbed her wrists once more. Her face was just above his, and they were looking straight at each other. She was about to speak, but when she saw the look in his eyes, her heart began to flutter. They just stared at each other, their hearts beating so loud as they took heavy breaths.
"My stomach is perfectly fine now,"
Brad said.
"So listen to me. I have something really important to tell you."
His voice was husky as he panted. It was as if he had just run a great marathon. Haley was nervous about what he might say, and she didn't want to waste any more time. Suddenly, she lunged forward and straddled him. She used her knees to support her weight, so she didn't sit on his stomach. Her hands were still on his shoulders while she stared into his wide eyes. "I won't listen to you," she said. Her expression was wild and determined, yet also gentle. She moved her face closer and her lips were about to touch his when Brad's warm hand suddenly pressed against her forehead. He was holding her back gently as she was straddling him.
"Please, listen to me first,"
he said. She just shook her head. "No, I won't listen to you. I won't listen. I won't," she yelled. Her eyes began to fill with tears. Brad was stunned and didn't know what to do. He had already reached his limit. His desire was so strong that he wasn't thinking straight. However, he mustered the last of his stubborn, ironclad will. He needed to express himself before it was too late.
"Haley, listen,
She interrupted him again. "I said I'm not listening to you. If you're going to tell me that you want to divorce me, I will never listen. Never. I won't listen to you," she yelled again, and tears slowly fell from her eyes. Brad felt like his world had collapsed. His heavy breathing slowed when he saw his beautiful wife crying. He began to caress her cheeks gently. Then he kissed her, tasting the salty tears falling from her eyes. It was as if he was not only trying to stop her tears, but also trying to take her pain away. Haley was stunned. She closed her eyes as he kept kissing her until finally his lips left her face. She opened her eyes and looked at him in a daze as he spoke.
"Who said I will divorce you?"
he asked. His voice was hoarse and filled with emotions. His eyes were looking wild and his breath was getting faster again.
"If I did that, I would die. Do you understand?"
he continued. Haley's heart raced as she quietly held her breath. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. She thought she was dreaming. She was still straddling him, and up until this moment, she hadn't noticed something growing between the two of them. It was physical evidence of her husband's desire. Episode 245, Promises. While Haley was struggling to understand what was going on, Brad gently brought her face closer to his so that their foreheads were touching as he began to speak.
"Listen, I will never divorce you. You will be my one and only. No matter what happens, you will forever be my love. But I need to leave you. I don't know how long it'll take. I don't know if you can wait for me. That's why
His words were interrupted by Haley's lips on his. She stopped kissing him after a moment. "Brad, no matter how long it takes, I will wait for you. I promise," she uttered. Her eyes were brimming with passion and love. Her voice was like the sweetest song on earth, reassuring him that she would wait for him forever. Don't forget that no matter what happens, I will always love you. I will always be here waiting for you to return. I love you so much. Whatever happens, I will never regret that I met you. I love you so much, she continued. She began kissing his forehead, his eyes, his nose, down to his lips before she pulled back again. She let go of his shoulders and leaned closer into his body. She could feel how aroused he was, and she flushed as she felt the heat creep all over her body as well. He sat there unmoving, breathing heavily as his gaze was locked on hers. She slowly untied her robe, like a movie playing in slow motion. As she removed her robe, Brad gasped, and his mouth hung open. His wife was wearing white lingerie. Her damp, long black hair was scattered over her shoulders, and he could see every curve of her body through the thin, silky fabric. She was still blushing intensely, yet no hesitation or doubt flashed across her beautiful eyes. Looking at the alluring figure on top of him, Brad was about to go crazy. His senses had gone wild, and he had lost control of his thoughts. All he could think about was touching her, being with her. She moved even closer. Her lips were about to touch his when she pulled away again, leaving the man gasping for more. She moved to get the blindfold under her pillow. She quickly put the blindfold over her eyes before crawling back to him and gently removing his mask. Her fingers then searched for his lips while he called out her name. Haley, he uttered in barely more than a whisper. He said it as if it was the most precious sound that could ever leave his mouth. Unable to contain himself anymore, he pulled her into a fiery, passionate kiss. Their lips touched and their breaths mingled. Their hearts were beating as if they were literally merged into one. This kiss was nothing like the kisses they had shared before. It was a kiss that seemed to be a declaration of their love, a promise to each other. They felt like they were drifting in the clouds. His hand slowly worked its way around her body, feeling every curve before he laid her on her back. His eyes were full of wonder as he looked at her. His desire was blazing like fire, and he kissed her intensely as their bodies melted into each other. He held her tighter as he began kissing down the nape of her neck. Time had ceased to exist for them. Their bodies began to merge as they explored each other deeper. Every worry and uncertainty disappeared as they enjoyed the intense pleasure. They felt as if they had both been lifted into the heavens while also drowning in a pool of their own love. Episode 246, Ripe Tomato. Intense emotion and uncontrollable desire enveloped the entire bedroom as the couple finally submitted themselves to each other. Their bodies were moving as one, and so were their souls. In this moment of heavenly pleasure, the two of them were making a promise to each other. A silent promise that only their souls could understand. A promise that was being engraved permanently in their hearts forever. And a promise that no one, not even the gods, could ever undo. The next morning, Tyler and Anderson were smiling wider than ever. They looked as though they had woken up with happy hearts, and to them, it was the best morning ever. Anderson couldn't hide his happiness, and he started humming a tune as soon as he got up. He seemed to be radiating beams of joy. Tyler felt exhausted just looking at the old man prancing around. He wiped tiny drops of sweat from his forehead. "Maybe you should save some of that excitement for when we know that a baby is on the way," he murmured as the old man walked up to him. "Don't you think we need to do something to celebrate?" Anderson asked Tyler excitedly. Tyler almost choked. "Celebrate what?" he replied in surprise. "I think we should save the celebration until we know if the night was a success." But then he started to think about it a little more. "Actually, you might be onto something. It's not a bad idea to celebrate. Besides, a baby will surely come soon, right?" Tyler kept thinking as a mischievous grin formed on his face. He leaned closer and whispered something in Anderson's ear. The king looked extremely impressed with Tyler's idea. He nodded vehemently before slowly walking away. A little later, 3 men were standing outside the bedroom. Tyler was hiding in the corner with a cell phone in his hand, ready to capture what was about to happen. They waited, but no one opened the door. Tyler was squatting down, and Anderson and Mr. Green were standing by the door like guards. "What time is it? They're still not awake?" Tyler asked before he looked at his wristwatch. After an hour went by, the 2 older men started moving uncomfortably. Tyler was about to stand up and tell them to take a rest when the moment they had been waiting for finally arrived. The door was opening. Tyler raised his cell phone while the other 2 prepared themselves. As soon as Brad stepped out of the door, Anderson and Mr. Green threw confetti up into the air. Brad was stunned and froze in place like a statue.
Congratulations, they said in unison while smiling happily. Brad just raised his hand and brushed the confetti off his head. He seemed confused about what was going on. Unable to contain his excitement anymore, Anderson was about to say something when Brad spoke first.
Where is Tyler?
He asked in a loud voice as he looked around. He spotted him squatting in the corner, taking pictures with his phone. Brad walked over to him, ignoring the two men and their confetti. Tyler stood up straight as soon as he saw him approaching. Brad's hands landed on Tyler's shoulders as he began to speak.
Tyler, I think
Brad paused. He seemed to be worried that his words weren't coming out right. Tyler looked at him curiously. Hey, what is it? Is something wrong? Tyler asked. I was expecting you to be super happy this morning. Brad was still looking at him with a serious expression.
She's not waking up. I'm afraid I overdid it.
Once again, Brad trailed off and seemed to have trouble finishing his statement. However, he had said enough for Tyler to realize what he was getting at. His mischievous grin got bigger. My goodness, this man outdid himself, he exclaimed. Tyler raised his hand and lifted Brad's mask. When he saw his face, he laughed loudly. Brad, your face looks like a ripe tomato.
Should I call a doctor?
Brad asked anxiously. Tyler tried desperately to suppress his laughter so he could reply. What are you talking about? Why are you so worried if she's not waking up? Tyler asked, and Brad shyly averted his gaze.
Last night, I couldn't control myself at all. I think I overdid it,
he answered honestly. Tyler burst out laughing again. He stood beside Brad, placed his arm around his shoulder, and whispered, Tell me, how many times did you do it? Tyler was just teasing Brad again. He didn't really expect him to answer. But Brad raised his arm and also put it around his friend.
Many times,
he admitted. His voice was shy and at the same time, still a little worried. Tyler pressed his lips together to stop himself from laughing too much. He took a deep breath and patted Brad's back. She didn't complain or tell you to stop, right? Tyler asked.
She didn't,
he answered. Tyler nodded. Well, if she didn't, you have nothing to worry about. She doesn't need a doctor, so stop getting so worried. You've exhausted her, and she just needs a good rest, Tyler explained. The look on Brad's face relaxed as he began to understand. However, he still seemed a little worried that Haley hadn't woken up.
Are you sure?
He asked again, but Tyler was losing his patience. You better go and relax. You're worrying too much, he explained as he turned to look Brad straight in the eyes. Now you're starting to make me concerned. If you're this stressed right now, what are you going to do when your wife gives birth? His words struck Brad like a bolt of lightning. He repeated them over in his head like a broken tape recording. When your wife gives birth. When your wife gives birth. When your wife gives birth. Episode 247, Rough Night. After hearing Tyler's words, Brad stood there motionless. Hearing someone mention pregnancy was more than he could handle. Tyler facepalmed when he saw Brad's reaction. He remained frozen like a stone while Tyler raised his hand and waved it in front of Brad's face. He didn't even blink. Hello, is anyone there? Tyler mumbled. Suddenly, Brad seemed to snap out of it. Brad reached out and held Tyler's shoulders again, but this time his grip was very tight.
What am I supposed to do now?
He asked. The extreme worry in his eyes returned, and the intensity increased.
How can I leave her now if she's going to get...
Tyler interrupted him. Hey, calm down. It doesn't always lead to pregnancy, especially not the first time. He sighed. You better go and cool off. We can talk about this more once you're thinking clearly. Brad took a deep breath and released Tyler's shoulders. Brad returned to his room and slowly walked up to the bed. He looked down at his wife. She was still sleeping peacefully. He felt calmer just looking at her beautiful face. He smiled, leaned down, and kissed her forehead. Time passed, and he just sat there watching her sleep. He was thinking deeply, and when his thoughts turned to Haley getting pregnant, he began to feel restless. He stood up and walked to the window. He tried taking deep, relaxing breaths, but he still couldn't calm himself down and think properly. He gazed out at the garden below and saw the hose they had left out the previous day. He walked over to the bed again and kissed Haley once more. She moved slightly, and the sheets dropped down, revealing her collarbone and chest. Brad could feel his face turning red as he admired her shapely figure, but then he noticed some marks on her body. She had small bruises on her neck and shoulders. His face turned sour. He couldn't believe he had done this to her. He criticized himself for losing control and not being gentle enough. He carefully lifted the blanket higher and saw more bruises on her porcelain white skin. He became even more worried than he was before. He gently wrapped her up in the blankets before hastily leaving the room. Brad stormed into the dining room where Tyler was eating. Once again, he approached his friend and held his shoulders tightly.
Tyler, I think I hurt her. She has bruises. It looks quite serious. I think we really need to call a doctor.
he said, looking extremely worried. Tyler slowly put down the spoon as he continued chewing. His eyes were filled with disbelief. After swallowing the food in his mouth, the man stood and put his hands on his waist. "Hey, didn't I tell you to go and cool off?" he said with a sigh. "This is why I told you before to watch some videos." He shook his head and sighed again. "Can't you see that I'm eating right now?" he complained, but Brad's expression didn't change. Tyler would have to try and explain things. He understood that his friend never had the luxury of learning about matters of physical love. He had spent almost his whole life dealing with profoundly serious matters. Before Haley, there was no time for romance. "Don't worry about the bruises. They won't affect her health at all," he said, and the concern in Brad's eyes seemed to decrease.
Are you sure? They look bad. What if it's painful for her?
He replied. Tyler just patted his shoulder.
"How ferocious did you two get last night? Don't worry about every single thing that happened. People can act differently in throes of passion. You better wait and talk to her. Don't ask doctors or anyone else. Do you understand?"
Brad tried to nod and then rubbed the back of his neck.
Do you think I'm a bad husband for doing such things to her?
He asked again. Tyler shook his head in frustration.
"I told you to calm down. Quit asking me such silly questions."
Tyler raised his head and shouted,
"Someone, please help me. I don't know what to say anymore.